I caught my mom sneaking into my boyfriend's house at midnight. My mom took one look at my boyfriend Danny and told me, "No way. You're not dating him." I was shocked. "What? Why not?" I asked. "You might find him cute, but I've heard the rumors from other parents. The kid's a player. He's broken the hearts of a dozen teenage girls in our neighborhood alone." She scoffed, shaking her head in disappointment. "Now please, date anyone but him." I couldn't argue back. My mom was my best friend. She always had my back. She'd never been strict or even asked for anything except for this. But the thing is, Danny wasn't like the rumors at all. Sure, he had this bad boy look, but he wasn't a flirt like everyone assumed. With me, he's sweet, loyal, and protective. So I hid my relationship from my mom, just like every other teenager my age did. I spent months using every cover story you can imagine, studying at the library, hanging at another friend's house, after school clubs and programs I wasn't even a part of. And I felt guilty, like really guilty each time. But what else could I do? But recently, the secret's been getting harder to keep. Last month, I left Danny's hoodie in my room and had to make up some story about borrowing it from a friend because class got too cold. Another time, I accidentally brought up Danny's name in a conversation and Mom immediately caught it. "Danny? Have you been seeing him again?" I panicked and shook my head. "No, Mom. Danny is a new student at school. He's in my AP psychology class." My mom squinted her eyes at me suspiciously, but let it go. But the closest call happened that same night when Mom came home early and entered my room while I was in the middle of FaceTiming Danny. I had to pretend it was my friend Eliza, and spent 10 minutes faking a conversation about homework while Danny stayed silent on the other end. When she finally left the room, I sighed. "It's exhausting hiding this from Mom," I told Danny. He nodded. "Hey, if our relationship is tiring you out, it's okay if you need to step away from it. I can wait for you, you know," he said so gently that it made my chest squeeze painfully. He was right. It was only a matter of time before she found out about us. But the thing was, I'd been so paranoid about my own lies that I didn't notice Mom started acting dodgy too. She'd been leaving the house late at night, wearing beautiful outfits and actually doing her makeup more than usual. She started smiling at her phone whenever she got a text, and even sounded all flirty and giggly when I passed by her room. "Can't wait to see you Saturday," she'd whisper, before abruptly ending the call the second she noticed me standing there. "Hot date, Mom?" I grinned at her. She blushed. "We're just talking," she said, rolling her eyes at me playfully. "Who's the lucky guy?" I asked. That's when she panicked. "No more questions," she said sternly. Honestly, I didn't think much of it until that Saturday morning when Danny invited me over to his place for the weekend. "Dad's gone all weekend," Danny texted. My heart jumped. Finally, a real date at his place without all the sneaking around. I told Mom I was sleeping over at my friend's house, and she smiled. "That's great, honey. I have plans too, so don't worry. Enjoy your sleepover." I was thrilled. Everything seemed to be going just as planned. That is, until I spotted it at my boyfriend's house. I went to Danny's house that evening, expecting to have the best date of my life. But when we passed by the upstairs bathroom, I froze. I couldn't believe what I saw. Right beside the sink was Mom's lucky hair clip, one with tiny blue stars that Dad had given before he passed away. I picked it up with shaking hands and turned to Danny. "Why is this here?" I asked him. Danny looked confused. I held it up to his face. "This is my mom's hair clip." His face turned pale. He held up his hands innocently. "Danny, have you been seeing my mom?" I asked, horrified. "What? No! Gross!" he yelled out with a disgusted look on his face. "Then how would you explain this?" He paused, thinking hard. Then it hit us both. We immediately started digging through our parents' Instagram and pulled up a photo from 2 weeks ago at a Chinese restaurant downtown. His dad posed under the same background as my mom. Then I remembered. "Oh my God. Last week I heard my mom on the phone and she mentioned your name. I thought she was talking about you being bad news, but she was giggling." Danny ran his hand through his hair. "My dad's been so secretive. He kept asking weird questions about you too, but I didn't think." Just then, the front door swung open. From the top of the stairs, we saw them. Danny's dad stumbled in with his arms wrapped around my mom, kissing and hitting the walls passionately, giggling and tumbling towards the couch like a bunch of teenagers. Danny and I ran down the stairs and flipped the light switch on. Everyone froze. Mom stared at me with her lipstick smudged before glancing down at the hair clip that was still in my hands. Mom frowned at me. "You said you were at Eliza's. You said you had plans. Didn't know they were with my boyfriend's dad." I snapped back. Danny's dad tried to be the adult in the room, saying calmly, "Look, we all clearly have some things to talk about here." But it didn't work. Things only got more heated. Mom's face turned red and she stepped toward me while Danny's dad held up his hands trying to calm everyone down. Danny squeezed my hand so tight it hurt, and I could feel him shaking next to me. His dad started talking about how we're all adults here and can discuss this like mature people, but Mom cut him off by pointing at me and demanding to know how long I'd been lying to her. I fired back, asking how long she'd been sneaking around with Danny's dad after telling me Danny was off limits. Danny jumped in yelling at his dad about keeping secrets and asking why he couldn't just be honest for once in his life. His dad tried to explain that he wanted to tell Danny, but the timing never felt right. which made Danny laugh in this bitter way that didn't sound like him at all. Mom kept saying I was at Eliza's house and I was supposed to be studying, completely ignoring the fact that she lied about her own plans. I held up the hair clip with the blue stars and asked her to explain why it was in Danny's bathroom if she wasn't seeing his dad. She grabbed for it, but I pulled it away and stuffed it in my pocket. Danny's dad moved between us like he thought we might start fighting physically. The four of us stood there in this awful circle in the middle of the living room with the bright lights making everything feel too exposed and harsh. Mom's makeup was smeared down her cheek, and her nice dress looked wrinkled from being pressed against the wall. Danny's dad had his shirt buttoned wrong and his hair stuck up on one side. I could see our reflections in the dark TV screen and we all looked like a disaster. Mom started in again about how I broke her trust and lied to her face for months. I shot back that she did the exact same thing while also banning me from seeing Danny based on stupid rumors. Danny told his dad he felt like an idiot for feeling guilty about hiding me when his dad was doing the same thing. His dad said it wasn't the same because he's an adult and can make his own choices. That made me even more angry because it was such a convenient excuse. Mom agreed with him, saying that parent relationships are different from teenage relationships, which felt like the biggest load of garbage I'd ever heard. I asked her how it was different when she was literally making out on a couch like a teenager. She told me to watch my tone and not be disrespectful. Danny pulled on my hand and nodded toward the door. I could tell he needed to get out of there as much as I did. We backed toward the entrance while our parents kept talking over each other about trust and honesty and being reasonable. Danny grabbed his keys from the hook by the door and we basically ran outside into the cold night air. His car was parked in the driveway and we jumped in without saying anything. He started the engine and pulled out fast, the tires making a squealing sound on the pavement. I looked back and saw both our parents standing in the doorway lit up by the porch light, watching us leave. We drove through the neighborhood in complete silence with just the sound of the heater blowing. Danny turned onto the main road and kept driving with no destination in mind. I stared out the window watching houses and streetlights blur past. My brain kept replaying the image of Mom and Danny's dad stumbling through the door, kissing and laughing. I felt sick thinking about it. Danny's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. We ended up at the park near the elementary school and he pulled into the empty parking lot. The playground equipment cast weird shadows across the grass. Neither of us said anything for at least 10 minutes. I counted the seconds ticking by on the dashboard clock. Finally, Danny let out this long breath and leaned his head back against the seat. I wanted to say something to make it better, but I had no idea what words would even help. We sat there for another 10 minutes before he started driving again. When we got to my street, he pulled up in front of my house and put the car in the park. I reached for the door handle but couldn't make myself open it. Danny looked at me and I looked at him and we both just sat there like idiots. I mumbled something about texting him later and he nodded. I got out and walked up to my front door without looking back. Inside the house was dark except for a light on in the kitchen. I heard Mom's car pull up outside and I ran upstairs to my room. I shut the door and locked it before she could follow me. My phone buzzed with a text from her saying we needed to talk. I turned it face down on my nightstand and got into bed fully clothed. Through the wall, I could hear her moving around in her room. Drawers opened and closed. Water ran in her bathroom. I knew she wasn't sleeping any more than I was. I lay there staring at the ceiling and going over every lie I'd told her in the past few months. The library excuse, the fake study group, pretending Danny was just some random kid in my class. All of it felt so stupid now. But then I thought about all her lies too. Saying she had plans when really she meant plans with Danny's dad. Getting all dressed up and claiming it was just for herself. Giggling on the phone and hanging up when I walked by. My phone buzzed around 7 in the morning with a text from Danny. It just said, "What the fuck do we even do now?" And I stared at it for a while before responding. I typed back, "No idea, but maybe we don't tell anyone yet?" He replied immediately saying that was probably smart because if this got out at the school, it would be a nightmare. I agreed and said both of us were already dealing with enough without adding gossip on top of it. He sent back a thumbs up and then nothing else. I heard Mom moving around downstairs making coffee. The smell drifted up through the vents. I stayed in bed until I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She knocked on my door and said my name softly. I didn't answer, and after a minute, she walked away. I got up and took the longest shower possible, letting the hot water run until it started going cold. When I came downstairs, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 plates of toast in front of her. She gestured for me to sit down and I did because I was starving. She started talking about how she's sorry things happened the way they did last night. I bit into my toast and didn't respond. She kept going, saying she should have been more honest with me about seeing someone. I put down my toast and asked her how long it had been going on. She got this uncomfortable look and said a few weeks. I called her out saying I found Instagram posts from over a month ago. She admitted it might have been closer to 2 months. I asked why she lied about having plans all those times, and she said she didn't think I'd understand. That made me so angry I could feel my face getting hot. I told her she made my relationship her business when she banned me from seeing Danny. She got defensive and said that was different because she was looking out for me. I asked how it was different when she was dating his dad behind everyone's back. She said her personal life was her business, and I was still a kid living under her roof. I stood up from the table and told her that was the most unfair thing I'd ever heard. She tried to backtrack, saying she didn't mean it like that, but the damage was already done. I grabbed my backpack and left for school without eating the rest of my toast. My phone kept buzzing during first period, and I saw it was Danny texting about his dad blowing up his phone with calls. He said he was ignoring all of them because he was too angry to talk. I texted back that I got it and was dealing with the same thing with Mom. During lunch, Eliza cornered me at my locker asking what was wrong. I told her just some family stuff and tried to brush it off. She kept pushing, saying I seemed really upset and she wanted to help. I appreciated it, but I wasn't ready to explain the whole mess. I told her my mom and I had a fight about rules and left it at that. She hugged me and said she was there if I needed to talk. At lunch, I sat at a table in the corner by myself while Danny sat on the opposite side of the cafeteria with some guys from his class. We made eye contact once across the room and it felt awful. All I could think about during my afternoon classes was Mom lecturing me about Danny's reputation. She'd gone on and on about how he was bad news and I needed to stay away from him. The whole time she was secretly seeing his dad and lying to my face about where she was going. The double standard made me want to scream. Part of me knew I'd been lying too, but I was lying because she made an unfair rule in the first place. She was the parent who set up this whole situation by banning me from dating Danny based on neighborhood gossip. When I got home that evening, Mom was waiting in the living room. She patted the couch next to her and said we needed to have a house rules conversation. I sat down, keeping as much distance between us as possible. She started talking about how we all just need to be more honest going forward. I interrupted her and said it was pretty rich coming from someone who'd been lying for 2 months. She tried to say it was complicated and she was trying to protect me. I asked her how dating Danny's dad behind my back was protecting me. She said she didn't want to upset me or make things awkward. I told her it was way more awkward finding out the way I did. She admitted that was fair but said we couldn't change what happened. Only move forward. I called her out for the complete hypocrisy of banning me from Danny while dating his dad. She got quiet for a minute and then said it was different because she's an adult. I laughed and told her that was just a convenient excuse that let her do exactly what she told me I couldn't do. She didn't have a good response to that. We sat there in silence for a while before she said she wasn't going to stop seeing Danny's dad. I told her I wasn't going to stop seeing Danny either. She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I went upstairs and shut my door, feeling exhausted from all of it. A couple hours passed and I heard Mom moving around in her room. I cracked my door open just enough to see her standing in front of her mirror putting on earrings. She had changed into a nice black dress and was doing her makeup carefully, the way she only did when she was going somewhere special. My stomach twisted as I realized she was getting ready to see Danny's dad again. After everything that happened tonight, after getting caught and having that huge fight, she was just going right back to him like nothing had changed. I watched her spray perfume on her wrists and grab her purse. She didn't even knock on my door to say goodbye or explain where she was going. The front door closed and I heard her car start in the driveway. I sat on my bed feeling something crack inside my chest. All those years of trusting her completely, of thinking she was my best friend who always had my back, it felt like it was falling apart. She'd looked me in the eye so many times and lied about where she was going. And now she was doing it again. I grabbed my phone and stared at the screen, not sure what to do with all the angry energy building up inside me. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Danny. "So I've been thinking," he wrote. "If our parents keep this up, we might actually end up as step-siblings, LOL. I stared at the message for a second, and then this weird laugh burst out of me. It was so absurd, so completely ridiculous that I couldn't help it. "Oh my God, stop," I typed back. "That's the worst thing you could have said." He sent back a meme of 2 people looking horrified with the caption, "When your boyfriend becomes your brother." I actually laughed out loud even though I wanted to cry. For the next 20 minutes, we went back and forth sending increasingly stupid memes about our situation. One showed a family tree that was just a tangled mess of lines. Another was a gif of someone screaming into a pillow. It felt good to share the stress with someone who understood exactly how messed up this was. Nobody else would get it. By the time we stopped texting, I felt a little lighter. Like at least I wasn't alone in this disaster. The next morning, I woke up and immediately grabbed my phone. I opened Instagram and went to Mom's profile, scrolling back through her posts from the past few months. Then I switched to Danny's dad's profile and did the same thing. My hands started shaking as I matched up the dates. 3 weeks ago, Mom posted a photo of her coffee at some cafe downtown. That same day, Danny's dad posted a picture of his breakfast with the same tile floor visible in the background. 2 weeks before that, they'd both posted sunset photos from the same park. I kept scrolling and finding more. A restaurant with the same red brick wall behind them. The farmer's market on the same Saturday morning. The movie theater on the same Friday night. I counted at least 5 times in just the past month where they'd clearly been together. My breathing got faster as I realized this had been going on way longer than 2 months. They might have been seeing each other for half a year or more. All those times Mom said she was meeting a friend or running errands, she'd been with him. My anxiety spiked and I felt sick to my stomach thinking about how long they'd been lying. At the school, I couldn't focus on anything. In AP Psychology, I just stared at my notebook while the teacher talked about cognitive development. I didn't write down a single note. After class, Eliza grabbed my arm in the hallway. "Okay, what's going on with you?" she asked, her face full of concern. "You've been acting really weird lately." I hesitated, trying to figure out what to say. "Just some family stuff," I told her, forcing a smile. "My mom and I have been fighting about rules and curfew and whatever." Eliza frowned. Are you sure that's all? You seem really upset. I nodded quickly. Yeah, it's just stressful at home right now. But I'm fine, I promise. She didn't look convinced, but she hugged me anyway. I'm here if you need to talk, she said. I thanked her and walked away feeling even worse. Now I was lying to my best friend too, adding another lie to the massive pile I'd already built. But I couldn't tell her the truth. I wasn't ready for everyone at the school to know that my mom was dating my boyfriend's dad, and our whole families were a complete mess. After school, I texted Danny and asked if he wanted to meet at the park. We sat on the swings like we were little kids again, both of us just dragging our feet in the dirt. Neither of us said anything for a while. This is so exhausting, I finally said. Danny nodded slowly. I can't handle my dad and your mom and us all at the same time, he admitted. It's too much. I looked over at him and saw how tired he looked. Maybe we need to take a break, I suggested quietly. Not like a breakup. Just a pause so we can deal with our families without also worrying about sneaking around. Danny was quiet for a minute. Yeah, he said. That makes sense. Just for a little while until things calm down. We agreed it wasn't permanent. Just a way to give ourselves space to breathe. We stayed at the park for another hour just talking about normal stuff like school and homework, avoiding the topic of our parents completely. The next morning, I woke up to a long text from Mom. I know you're angry with me and you have every right to be, it started. I've been so lonely since your dad died. I got scared of being alone forever. And when I met Danny's dad, it felt like maybe I could be happy again. I really like him and I'm not going to stop seeing him. But I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you. I should have told you from the beginning instead of sneaking around. I was afraid of how you'd react and I handled it badly. I read the message 3 times. Part of me was still furious that she'd lied for months. But another part of me felt this unexpected wave of sympathy. I'd never really thought about how lonely Mom must have been after Dad died. She always seemed so strong and put together. I didn't know she was scared of being alone. It didn't make the lying okay, but at least now I understood why she did it. I typed back, I'm still hurt, but I get it. Then I put my phone down before I could overthink it. That afternoon, Danny finally confronted his dad. He texted me about it later that night. His dad had just gotten home from work, and Danny met him in the driveway before he could even get to the front door. I feel completely blindsided, Danny told him. Why couldn't you just be honest about dating someone? Why did you have to sneak around and make me find out the worst possible way? His dad apparently just stood there looking ashamed. He tried to explain that he didn't know how to tell Danny he was seeing someone. He was worried Danny would be upset, or feel like he was replacing Danny's mom. Danny told him that wasn't an excuse. I need you to tell me about major stuff in your life, Danny said firmly. Not hide it from me like I'm a little kid. If you're dating someone, I deserve to know. His dad agreed and apologized. Danny said he actually looked genuinely sorry for once instead of just making excuses. A few days later, I was walking home from the grocery store carrying a bag of snacks. I passed by the outdoor coffee shop on Main Street and stopped cold. Mom and Danny's dad were sitting at one of the tables together. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, just talking and drinking coffee. But Marco Sutton was standing nearby at the crosswalk and he was giving them this knowing look. He caught my eye and smiled like he was happy for them or something. My stomach dropped. Marco was one of those neighborhood parents who knew everyone and talked to everyone. If he'd noticed them together, then other people probably had too. The secret was spreading beyond just our families. Soon everyone in the neighborhood would know, and it would become this whole thing that people gossiped about. The next week, my AP history teacher pulled me aside after class. You've been very distracted lately, she said gently. I'm going to send you to talk with Queenie Griffin in the counseling office. I think it might help. I wanted to argue, but I just nodded. Queenie's office was small and covered in motivational posters. She had me sit in a comfortable chair and asked what was going on. I was resistant at first, giving vague answers about family stress. But Queenie was actually really easy to talk to. She didn't push or judge. Eventually, I told her a simplified version about my mom dating someone and it causing problems at home. I left out all the details about it being Danny's dad. Sometimes parents make mistakes too, Queenie said thoughtfully. They're just people trying to figure things out. Maybe honest communication could help you both feel heard. It was simple advice, but it gave me a tiny bit of hope. Maybe we could actually fix this if we just talked honestly instead of yelling or avoiding each other. That night, I found Mom in the kitchen making tea. Can we talk? I asked. She looked surprised but nodded and sat down at the table with me. I took a deep breath and started listing every single lie I'd told her over the past few months. The fake library study sessions, the made-up after-school clubs, all the times I said I was at Eliza's house when I was really with Danny. Mom's eyes got wider with each confession. I'll be completely honest about Danny from now on, I told her. But you have to be honest about Danny's dad. We can't fix the trust between us if we're both still lying. She looked shocked that I was putting everything out on the table like this. I just think we need real honesty from both of us, I explained. Otherwise, nothing's going to get better. We'll just keep sneaking around and lying and making everything worse. Mom was quiet for a long moment, and then she nodded slowly. You're right, she said softly. Okay, I'll be honest too. The next morning, Mom came into my room while I was getting ready for school and sat on my bed with this hopeful look on her face. She started talking about how maybe the 4 of us could have dinner together sometime soon, just to clear the air and talk things through like adults. I stopped brushing my hair and turned around to look at her. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen, and she looked surprised. I explained that forcing some fake family dinner would just make me feel like she was trying to erase my feelings and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. She tried to argue that it might help us all understand each other better, but I stood firm. I said I needed time and space, not some awkward meal where we all pretended to be okay. Her face fell and she looked hurt, but she nodded slowly and said, okay, she'd drop it. After she left my room, I felt this small surge of victory, like I'd actually set a real boundary and she'd respected it for once. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Danny, even though we'd agreed not to contact each other for a while. It was a really long message that filled up my entire screen. He wrote about how he knew people saw him as this player who broke hearts, and how some of that reputation came from actual mistakes he'd made when he was younger and dumber. He admitted he used to flirt with girls just because it made him feel good about himself, and he understood why parents warned their daughters about him. But then he said he'd changed and didn't want that drama anymore. He said he wanted something real and stable with me, not the chaos everyone expected from him. Reading his words made something in my chest loosen up, and I realized how much I'd missed talking to him. I read the text 3 times, sitting on my bed and feeling my anger at him start to fade. Later that evening, I was scrolling through Instagram when a DM notification popped up from Danny's dad. My stomach dropped when I saw his name. He'd sent me this long message apologizing for the awkwardness of everything, and saying he really cared about my mom. He said he hoped we could all figure out how to make this work because he didn't want to lose her. I felt instantly annoyed that he was reaching out to me directly, instead of talking to Danny or dealing with things through proper channels. It felt like he was trying to go around everyone and manipulate the situation. I screenshot the message and sent it to Danny with just a question mark. His response came back fast and he was furious. He wrote that his dad had no right to message me and that it was completely inappropriate. We ended up texting back and forth for 20 minutes, both of us getting more irritated with our parents for not respecting basic boundaries. That same night, Mom knocked on my door and asked if we could talk again. She came in and sat in my desk chair while I stayed on my bed. She started telling me about how hard things had been since Dad died, and her voice got really quiet. She said she'd felt like she was only existing as someone's mother instead of being a whole person with her own needs and wants. She talked about being scared to date anyone because she felt guilty for wanting companionship when Dad was gone. She said she knew Danny's dad wasn't perfect, but he made her feel like herself again instead of just a widow or just a mom. I felt my anger mixing with real sympathy for her because I'd never thought about how lonely she must have been. She wasn't crying, but her eyes looked wet, and I could tell this was hard for her to admit. I told her I understood she was lonely, but I was still hurt by how she'd handled everything. She nodded and said she knew, and we sat there in uncomfortable silence for a minute before she left my room. The next morning, I woke up to my phone absolutely blowing up with notifications. I grabbed it off my nightstand and saw a bunch of texts from people at the school. Someone had posted a photo in the neighborhood Facebook group from some local community event, and in the background you could clearly see my mom and Danny's dad standing really close together and laughing. My classmates had seen it and put the pieces together about who they were. The texts ranged from curious questions to straight-up gossip, and I felt panic rising in my throat as I scrolled through them. This was about to become major school drama, and there was nothing I could do to stop it from spreading. I texted Eliza in a total panic, and she responded immediately asking what was wrong. I sent her a quick explanation about the Facebook photo, and she told me to come over right now. I threw on clothes and drove to her house, and she already had her living room set up with blankets and had queued up dumb comedies on Netflix. We spent the whole evening watching stupid movies and eating popcorn, and she didn't push me for details or ask a million questions. She just let me hide out at her place and decompress. Being there felt like a break from all the stress, though part of me felt guilty for using her as a cover again when I'd promised myself I'd stop lying. The next day, I had to run to the grocery store to pick up stuff for dinner. I was in the cereal aisle reaching for a box when I looked up and froze. All 4 of us were standing there in the same aisle. Me, Danny, Mom, and Danny's dad. We all just stared at each other while other shoppers walked around us like we were statues. Danny's dad tried to break the tension by making small talk about the weather, and Mom gave this nervous fake laugh. Danny and I didn't say anything. We just grabbed our stuff as fast as possible and headed for the checkout. Walking away, I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. Out in the parking lot, I was loading groceries into my car when Marco Sutton appeared next to me. He had this big friendly smile and said something about how nice it was that our families were getting close. His tone made it clear he thought this was cute neighborhood news, like some sweet story about people finding love. I wanted to scream that it was actually a complicated mess, but instead I just smiled politely and said something vague. I got in my car as fast as I could and drove away, feeling angry that everyone seemed to think this situation was simple or sweet when it was tearing me apart. At the school the next day, I was walking to my locker when this girl from my English class made a snarky comment about keeping it in the family. She said it loud enough for people around us to hear, and a few of them laughed. I stopped walking and turned to face her. I said calmly that our parents' dating didn't make Danny and me related, and that maybe she should get her facts straight before spreading rumors. She looked surprised that I'd actually responded instead of just walking away. It was a small moment, but I felt good about it. Like I was controlling my own story instead of letting gossip define everything. Walking away from her, I felt stronger somehow. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Danny saying he was crashing at his friend's house because he needed space from his dad. He said he was tired of the tension at home and just needed to get away for a night. He sounded sad but also firm in his decision, and I texted back that I was proud of him for setting boundaries. At the same time, I felt this heavy weight in my chest, thinking about how our families were falling apart. I sat on my bed staring at my phone and wondered if things could ever get back to normal, or if this was just our life now. The next morning, Mom knocked on my door before school and asked if we could talk. I braced myself for another lecture, but instead she said she wanted us to see Queenie Griffin together for a real counseling session. She promised she would actually listen this time without getting defensive or making excuses. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to figure out if she was serious. She looked tired and sad, like she'd been up all night thinking about everything. I told her okay, and she pulled out her phone right there to schedule the appointment. Watching her type the email to Queenie made something loosen in my chest. Maybe we could actually fix this with professional help instead of just screaming at each other in the living room. I went to the school that day feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in weeks. The counseling session happened 3 days later in Queenie's office at the school. All 4 of us sat in a circle on these uncomfortable plastic chairs. Queenie started by explaining that we needed clear boundaries if our families were going to interact. She gave each of us a piece of paper and told us to write down our personal rules separately, without talking to each other. I wrote mine fast because I'd been thinking about this for days. No surprise visits to each other's houses. No trying to force family bonding like dinners or game nights. No using me or Danny to pass messages between the parents. When we all read our lists out loud, I was surprised that Danny had written almost the same things I had. Mom and Danny's dad looked uncomfortable hearing everything laid out so clearly. Queenie collected all the papers and typed up a master list on her laptop right there. Seeing everything written out in official bullet points made it feel more serious and real, like we were actually trying to fix things instead of just hoping they would get better on their own. 2 nights later, I was doing homework in my room when my phone buzzed with a text from Danny. He sent me a photo of his dad's driveway with Mom's car parked in it. The timestamp on the photo showed it was past 11 at night, way past the reasonable hours we'd all agreed on during the counseling session. My stomach twisted up as I stared at the picture. Before I could even respond, Mom texted me with some excuse about losing track of time while they were talking. The message felt hollow and wrong. I sat there on my bed feeling all the cautious hope from the counseling session deflate like a balloon with a hole in it. The boundaries we'd set didn't mean anything if they weren't actually going to follow them. I texted back a simple okay, but I knew she could tell I was upset. Danny sent another message asking if I was all right, and I didn't know what to say. The rules we'd carefully written down felt meaningless now. I stared at my phone for a long time before typing out a message to Danny. I told him I needed to pause our relationship completely for a while. Not a breakup, just a break. The emotional crossfire between our families was too much, and I couldn't handle dating drama on top of family drama. My finger hovered over the send button for almost a minute before I finally pressed it. His response came back fast, saying he understood, but I could tell from the way he worded things that he was hurt. He wrote that he got it and wouldn't push me. Reading his message made my chest feel heavy and sad. I wanted to take it back immediately, but I knew I couldn't keep doing this. The stress of watching our parents break rules while trying to maintain our own relationship was tearing me apart. An hour later, my phone buzzed again with another text from Danny. He said he agreed to the pause but asked if we could check in with each other in exactly 1 week. He didn't want to lose me completely, just wanted to give us both space to breathe. I appreciated that he was being specific about it instead of leaving everything vague and uncertain. Having a set time frame made it feel less scary somehow, like we weren't ending things forever, just putting them on hold while we dealt with our families. I texted back agreeing to the 1-week check-in. He sent back a simple thumbs-up emoji, and then neither of us said anything else. I turned my phone face down on my nightstand and tried not to cry. The next 2 days, I threw myself into schoolwork like my life depended on it. I finished all my homework for the week and even got ahead on reading for AP Psychology. When I wasn't studying, I helped Mom with errands and household projects. We went grocery shopping together on Saturday morning and spent the afternoon organizing the garage. Neither of us talked about Danny's dad or the broken boundaries. We just focused on normal mother-daughter stuff like comparing prices on cereal and deciding which old boxes to donate. The routine felt stabilizing in a weird way, like we were rebuilding our foundation one small, boring task at a time. Mom seemed relieved that I was talking to her again, even if we were just discussing whether to keep Dad's old golf clubs. On Sunday afternoon, Mom told me she was meeting a friend for coffee downtown. She grabbed her purse and keys and headed out the door. I went back to my homework, but something felt off about the way she'd said it. An hour later, I needed to pick up my prescription from the pharmacy near the restaurant district. When I drove past Danny's dad's restaurant, I spotted Mom's car in the parking lot. My hands tightened on the steering wheel and I felt my face get hot. She'd lied to me again. Just a casual, easy lie about meeting a friend when she was really seeing Danny's dad. I picked up my prescription and drove home, practicing in my head what I was going to say. When Mom got home 2 hours later, I was waiting in the kitchen. I told her I'd seen her car at the restaurant. She looked caught, her face going red as she stammered out an explanation. She admitted she was struggling to balance her relationship with rebuilding my trust. I cut her off and said she had to choose which one mattered more right now. She stood there in the doorway looking torn and sad, but I didn't back down. The next day, Danny texted me about his dad taking him out for coffee. His dad had finally admitted he was scared of growing old alone after the divorce. He apologized to Danny for blindsiding him with the relationship and promised to include him in major life decisions going forward. Danny's text was long and detailed, describing the whole conversation. I could tell he was feeling torn between understanding his dad's loneliness and still being angry about all the deception. He wrote that his dad had actually cried a little bit when talking about being alone. That detail made me feel weird and uncomfortable. Like I was seeing Danny's dad as an actual person with feelings instead of just the guy causing problems. I texted back that I was glad they'd talked, but I didn't know what else to say. The situation felt too complicated for a text conversation. Thursday afternoon, I had my regular appointment with Queenie even though there wasn't any immediate crisis happening. I almost canceled because it seemed pointless to go when things were relatively calm. But I went anyway and ended up talking about self-care and healthy boundaries for the full hour. Queenie reminded me that healing takes time and that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you take steps backward before you can move forward again. She asked how I was taking care of myself outside of dealing with family drama. I realized I hadn't really thought about it. We talked about the importance of maintaining my own life and interests separate from all the parent stuff. Walking out of her office, I felt a quiet steadiness instead of the constant anxiety I'd been carrying around for weeks. The feeling didn't last long, but it was nice while it did. That evening, there was a school event in the gym for all the clubs to showcase their activities. I went because Eliza was presenting for the debate team, and I'd promised to support her. I was standing near the refreshment table when I overheard two girls from my English class talking. They were gossiping about the parent dating situation, and one of them said something about how messy it all was. My face got hot and I wanted to run out of the gym. But instead I stayed put, and when one of them asked me directly about it, I gave a simple response. I said it was complicated and we were working through it. I didn't elaborate or overshare or try to explain the whole story. The girls looked disappointed that I wasn't giving them more details, but I didn't care. I grabbed a cookie from the table and walked away to find Eliza. Keeping my response brief actually made me feel more in control, like I was choosing what to share instead of letting gossip control the narrative. I didn't owe anyone the full story of what was happening in my family. I left the school event and drove home feeling like I'd reclaimed a small piece of control over my own story. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but I could see Mom sitting on the front porch steps with her phone in her hands. She looked up when my car door slammed and patted the spot next to her. I sat down without saying anything, and we both just stared at the empty street for a minute. Mom broke the silence first and asked what would actually help me feel better about everything that had happened. I didn't have to think about my answer because I'd been carrying it around for days. I told her I needed predictability, that I needed to know where she was, and that she'd stick to what she said she was going to do. No more surprises or last-minute changes or vague plans that turned out to be something else entirely. She nodded slowly and didn't make any excuses or try to explain away her behavior. She just said she'd work on that, and her voice sounded genuine instead of defensive. For the first time in weeks, I felt like she really heard what I was saying, instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. We sat there for another 10 minutes, not saying much else before heading inside to our separate rooms. A week went by, and Danny and I had our scheduled check-in call exactly when we'd agreed to have it. Neither of us rushed to talk about getting back together or what our relationship status was. Instead, we just compared notes on how the boundaries with our parents had been working. Danny said his dad had been respecting the rule about giving him notice before having anyone over. I told him about Mom starting to be more upfront about her plans even when I didn't ask. We talked about our families like we were scientists comparing lab results instead of teenagers dealing with messy emotions. It felt grounded and mature in a way our relationship hadn't been before, when everything was secretive and dramatic. I asked how he was really doing, and he said tired but okay. He asked the same thing back, and I gave him the same answer. We weren't forcing anything or pretending we had it all figured out. We were just being honest about where we were at, and that felt more real than all the months of sneaking around had ever felt. Danny's voice changed when he started telling me about a conversation he'd had with his dad the night before. His dad had opened up about the divorce and how it messed him up way more than he'd ever admitted to anyone. Danny said his dad actually got emotional talking about feeling like a failure after his marriage fell apart. He'd thrown himself into work and tried to pretend he was fine, but the loneliness had been eating at him for years. Danny was realizing that some of his own relationship patterns came from watching his parents' marriage fall apart when he was younger. He'd seen his dad pull away emotionally, and his mom get angry and resentful. He'd learned that relationships were supposed to be complicated and painful. But now he was starting to understand his dad as a flawed person, who made mistakes instead of just being mad at him for lying. Danny sounded thoughtful instead of angry when he talked about it. I could hear him processing things in real time and trying to make sense of his own feelings. It made me think about my own family patterns, and how Mom's grief over losing Dad had shaped the way she approached relationships now. That same evening, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard Mom's voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, and I could tell from her tone that she was talking to Danny's dad. I froze with the kettle in my hand and listened, even though I knew I probably shouldn't. Mom was telling him that she needed to slow things down to focus on rebuilding trust with me. Her voice was firm, but not mean when she explained that her relationship with me had to come first right now. She said she cared about him, but she couldn't keep seeing him if it was damaging her bond with me. There was a long pause where I assumed he was responding, and then Mom said she hoped he understood, but this was what she needed to do. I felt a wave of relief wash over me that was so strong I had to sit down at the kitchen table. She was actually prioritizing me over her own relationship. She was choosing to put in the work to fix what was broken between us instead of just moving forward with her life and expecting me to get over it. I finished making my tea and went to my room before she could catch me listening. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like maybe we could actually get back to a good place. The next afternoon, Danny and I met up at the park to talk about what we wanted going forward. We sat on the swings like we were little kids and pushed ourselves back and forth slowly while we talked. I started by saying I still had feelings for him, but I wasn't sure what to do with them right now. He said he felt the same way, and that made me feel less alone. We agreed to try being friends first, and rebuilding from there without all the pressure of sneaking around or dealing with our parents' drama constantly. It felt bittersweet because we both knew we wanted more than friendship eventually, but it also felt like the healthiest choice for right now when everything else in our lives was so messy. Danny said he wanted to work on being the kind of person who could handle a real relationship, instead of just reacting to his reputation. I told him I wanted to figure out who I was outside of being someone's girlfriend or someone's daughter. We made a promise to be honest with each other about how we were feeling instead of pretending everything was fine. When we left the park, I felt sad but also lighter somehow. 2 days later, both sets of parents called us for what they described as a family meeting. My stomach dropped because I was sure they were going to announce they were moving in together or getting married or something equally terrible. But instead, they told us they were taking an informal break from dating to let everyone cool off and reassess the situation. They weren't promising it was permanent or making any big declarations about the future. They were just acknowledging that things had moved way too fast and that they needed to respect our feelings instead of bulldozing ahead with their relationship. Mom looked at me when she said it like she was checking to make sure I believed her. Danny's dad had his hand on Danny's shoulder in this awkward dad way that was probably supposed to be comforting. I felt skeptical that the break would actually last because adults always seemed to do whatever they wanted regardless of what they said. But at least they were trying to show they cared about how this affected us instead of just telling us to deal with it. A few days later, I was walking home from the library when I spotted Mom and Danny's dad talking on the sidewalk near the coffee shop downtown. They weren't touching or standing super close, but they were clearly having a serious conversation. Danny was coming out of the store across the street and he saw them at the same time I did. We made eye contact and I could see him tense up like he was about to march over there. But then he just shook his head and kept walking toward his car. I did the same thing and headed in the opposite direction toward home. We were learning to let our parents make their own choices while maintaining our boundaries. It wasn't our job to police what they did or didn't do together. We'd set our rules and now it was up to them to follow through or not. If they messed up again, we'd deal with it then. But constantly monitoring their every move would just make us crazy and wouldn't actually change their behavior anyway. That weekend, Mom and I sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop and set up a shared calendar where she could put her plans. The idea was that I'd know where she was without having to ask or worry or check up on her constantly. She added her work schedule and her grief support group meetings, and a few social plans she already had coming up. We also agreed on a house rule that she wouldn't have overnight guests without giving me advance notice. Not asking my permission exactly, but just making sure I knew what to expect. It felt practical and calm instead of angry or controlling. We were building a system that respected both our needs instead of just having one person make all the rules. Mom said she appreciated that I was willing to work with her on this instead of just staying mad forever. I told her I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me because I needed the stability, but I could tell it meant something to her anyway. Setting up the calendar only took about 20 minutes, but it felt like we were laying groundwork for something bigger. I texted Danny to see if he wanted to meet for coffee and test out our new friend's first dynamic. He said yes, and we met at the place near school that we used to go to back when we were dating in secret. It felt weird walking in there together in broad daylight, not worried about who might see us. We got our drinks and sat at a table by the window, and it was awkward at first. We were both hyper-aware of not wanting to slip back into couple behavior. I caught myself reaching for his hand across the table and pulled back. He started to lean in close when he was talking and then corrected his posture. But after about 15 minutes, we started to relax and just be ourselves. Danny showed me some stupid meme on his phone about a confused cat, and I actually laughed out loud. We spent the next half hour just scrolling through random funny posts and sharing them with each other. By the end, it felt workable, like maybe we really could be in each other's lives without all the drama and pressure. We hugged goodbye in the parking lot, and it lasted maybe 2 seconds longer than a friend hug probably should have, but neither of us said anything about it. On Monday, I walked into school and immediately noticed something was different. The usual whispers and stares that had been following me around for weeks were gone. I walked past a group of girls from my English class, and they were talking about something involving the basketball team and someone's ex-boyfriend. Nobody even looked at me. The gossip had moved on to some other drama, and I was yesterday's news. Instead of feeling triumphant or relieved, I just felt hollow. The attention moving away didn't erase what had happened or fix any of the problems in my family. It just meant people had found something more interesting to talk about. I could walk through the halls now without everyone staring, but that didn't make my life any less complicated. At lunch, I sat with some people from my AP Psych class, and nobody brought up my mom or Danny or any of it. We just talked about the upcoming test and complained about homework like normal students. It was such a basic, ordinary conversation, and it felt strange after weeks of being the center of gossip. I realized I'd gotten used to being watched and judged, and now I had to figure out how to just be a regular person again. That week, Mom found a flyer at the community center for a grief support group for widows, and actually signed up for it. I came home from the school on Tuesday and saw the meeting schedule stuck to the fridge with a magnet. She circled Thursday evenings in red marker. When Thursday came, she got ready quietly, putting on jeans and a sweater instead of her usual date night outfits. She looked nervous when she left. I sat on the couch doing homework and checking my phone every few minutes, wondering how it was going. She came back 2 hours later and her whole face looked different. Not happy exactly, but lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. She made tea and sat at the kitchen table staring out the window for a while. I asked if the meeting was okay and she nodded. She told me there were 6 other women there who all lost their husbands. Some recently and some years ago like her. They just talked about regular stuff at first, like jobs and kids and annoying neighbors. Then they talked about the hard parts. She said it felt good to be around people who understood without her having to explain everything. Over the next few weeks, she went to every Thursday meeting. She started mentioning names of the other women, like Carol, who worked at the bank, and Jennifer, who had 3 kids in college. She seemed steadier somehow, like she was building something for herself that had nothing to do with dating or being my mom. Watching her take care of herself in a way that was actually healthy made me feel hopeful that maybe she really was growing and changing. Around the same time, Danny texted me that he was moving back home. His dad sat him down and promised to give him real notice before inviting anyone over, not just springing surprises on him. They made a system where his dad would text him by noon if he had plans that evening and Danny would do the same. It sounded simple, but Danny said it made a huge difference. He felt like his dad was actually respecting him instead of treating him like a kid who didn't need to know anything. They set up other boundaries too, like knocking before entering each other's rooms and having a weekly check-in dinner on Sundays, just the 2 of them. Danny sent me a photo of the whiteboard calendar they hung in the kitchen where they both wrote their schedules. It looked a lot like what Mom and I were building. He seemed more settled when I saw him at the school, less tense and angry. Having clear rules made him feel respected instead of blindsided by whatever his dad decided to do. Mom and I started our own routines too. We agreed to have dinner together 3 times a week, no phones at the table, just talking about our days. On Sundays, we did a coffee check-in in the morning where we'd sit on the back porch and go over our plans for the week. It felt awkward at first because we were both trying so hard to make it work. But after a few weeks, it started feeling more natural. We weren't back to being best friends like before, not yet anyway. But we were rebuilding something that felt more solid. Our old relationship had been really close, but maybe it didn't have enough boundaries. We were too mixed up in each other's business. Now we were creating space while still staying connected. The structure helped both of us know what to expect, instead of just winging it and getting hurt when things went wrong. One Saturday, I finally pulled Danny's hoodie out of my closet where it had been sitting in a heap for months. I texted him asking if he wanted it back and he said yes, so we met at the park. I handed him the faded black hoodie and he held it up examining it like it was evidence from a crime scene. He joked that this was the smoking gun that almost got us both caught. I laughed and said it should be in a museum labeled proof of our secret relationship. We sat on a bench and kept making stupid jokes about it, calling it Exhibit A and talking like we were detectives solving a case. The jokes felt light instead of painful. I realized we were both actually healing from all the stress of sneaking around and lying and getting caught. There was still an ache in my chest when I looked at him, this feeling of missing what we used to have. But it was manageable now. It didn't crush me anymore. We could sit together and laugh about our mess without it feeling like the world was ending. Mom scheduled an individual session with Queenie to work on her communication skills. She told me about it at dinner one night, saying she wanted to learn how to have hard conversations without getting defensive or shutting down. When she came home from that first session, she had printed papers with scripts for different situations. Things like how to apologize properly, how to listen without interrupting, how to acknowledge someone's feelings even when you disagree. She also had a plan for catching herself when she started getting defensive, like taking a breath and asking herself what she was actually afraid of. She stuck the papers on the fridge next to her grief group schedule. Seeing her put in actual work instead of just saying sorry and expecting everything to be fine made me believe she was serious about changing. It wasn't just words anymore. She was doing the uncomfortable work of looking at her own patterns and trying to fix them. Queenie called me in for a session the following week and suggested we try a different approach. Instead of forcing all 4 of us into the same room where everyone got triggered and defensive, she thought separate 2-person meetings would work better. Mom with me, Danny with his dad. That way each pair could focus on their own relationship without the chaos of everyone's emotions crashing into each other. She said sometimes parallel processing works better than trying to fix everything at once. When people aren't all in the same space, they can actually hear each other instead of just reacting. It made sense. Every time all four of us had tried to talk, it turned into a disaster with everyone talking over each other and nobody listening. This way, Mom and I could work on our stuff and Danny and his dad could work on theirs, without it turning into a huge fight. At the school, I started noticing Danny was different. Not in some big obvious way, but in small things. He stopped going to the parties where people expected him to flirt with everyone and act like the player everyone thought he was. When friends were invited him, he'd make up excuses or just say he wasn't interested. He was more direct with people about his boundaries, too. Like when someone made a joke about him hooking up with random girls, he'd shut it down instead of laughing along. He didn't make a big speech about it or try to defend himself. He just changed his behavior and let his actions speak. Over a few weeks, I noticed people starting to see him differently. The whispers about him being a player got quieter. People stopped assuming things about him. It wasn't because he was arguing with everyone about his reputation. It was because he was actually being different and people could see it. His actions were louder than any of the old rumors. Mom sat me down at the kitchen table one evening after dinner and told me she needed to say something. She admitted that her original ban on me dating Danny was based on fear and wasn't fair to either of us. She said she'd heard rumors from other parents and let that make her decision instead of actually getting to know him or trusting my judgment. She apologized for not giving us a chance and for being hypocritical about the whole thing. But here's what really got me. She didn't demand that I forgive her right away or tell her everything was fine now. She just owned her mistake and said she understood if I needed time to trust her again. That willingness to apologize without expecting instant forgiveness felt like real growth. Most people apologize but then get mad when you don't immediately say it's okay. She didn't do that. She just left her apology there and gave me space to feel however I felt about it. The next day, I told Mom I was sorry too. I apologized for all the lying and sneaking around, for using Eliza as a cover and making up fake club meetings and everything else. I explained that I broke her trust even if I disagreed with her rules. We can't build something new if we're both just blaming each other for the past. We sat at the table and worked out a reasonable curfew. Nothing crazy strict, but also not totally unlimited. We agreed on what she called a transparency window where I'd share my general plans without her tracking every single move I made. Like I'd tell her if I was going to Danny's or Eliza's or the library, but she wouldn't interrogate me about every detail or check my location constantly. It felt like we were meeting in the middle instead of one of us winning and the other losing. We were both giving up something to make it work. That evening, we spent almost 2 hours at the kitchen table negotiating all the details of our new trust system. We wrote down what would happen if either of us broke the rules, because we both knew we might mess up sometimes. Mom suggested something she called off-ramps, which meant if something wasn't working, we could adjust it instead of just sticking to rigid rules we'd end up hating. Like if the curfew was too early or too late, we could revisit it in a month and change it based on how things were actually going. If the transparency window felt like too much or not enough, we could modify it. The whole process made me feel like an equal partner in our relationship instead of just a kid being managed. We were building something together instead of her just making rules and expecting me to follow them. By the end of the night, we had a whole page of notes and agreements. It wasn't perfect, and we both knew we'd probably have to adjust things, but it felt like a real start. That night, I pulled out my journal and opened to a blank page, staring at the empty lines for a minute before I started writing. I wrote about Mom and her mistakes, about Danny's dad and their secrets, about me and all my lying. The words came out messy at first, crossing out sentences and rewriting thoughts, but eventually I got to what I really wanted to say. I'm learning that you can love people who make messy choices, including yourself. I wrote that line twice because it felt important. Mom messed up by being hypocritical and sneaking around, but that doesn't erase all the years she had my back or the work she's putting in now. Danny's dad blindsided his son, but he's trying to fix it. I lied for months straight, but I'm owning it now and building something better. Holding people accountable doesn't mean cutting them off completely. It means saying this hurt me, this wasn't okay, and now we need to do better. I closed the journal and tucked it under my pillow, feeling something shift inside me that wasn't dramatic or life-changing, just real and quiet and important. The next evening, I was doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Going to dinner with a friend, should be home by 9:30, the message said. I stared at the text for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the location-sharing app we both had on our phones. I could check right now and see exactly where she was. The old me would have opened that app immediately, tracking her movements and cross-referencing with restaurant locations. But I made myself put the phone face down on the table and go back to my homework. She told me her plans without me asking, gave me a time without me demanding it. That was her following through. Now I had to choose whether to trust instead of verify. At 9:28, I heard her car pull into the driveway, and when she walked through the door, she looked surprised that I was still up. I just smiled and said, "Welcome home," and she smiled back with this relieved look like she knew what I hadn't done. On Monday, I was walking to AP Psych when I spotted Danny coming from the other direction down the hallway. We both slowed down as we got closer, and he gave me this half smile. "Brutal homework last night," he said, and I laughed and told him I spent 2 hours on those practice questions. We stood there for just a second, not defining what we were or making promises about anything, just sharing this easy moment about homework stress like normal people. Then the bell rang and we both headed to class. And walking away, I felt this sense of balance that I hadn't felt in weeks. We were both in better places than we were 7 weeks ago when everything exploded in his living room. The uncertainty about what we were didn't scare me anymore because I knew we were both okay, both growing, both figuring things out at our own pace. So yeah, that's basically it. Nothing too deep, just how it happened. Thanks for hanging out, it's always chill having you here. Catch you next time if you swing by.